I always believed probate court was for arguing over antique lamps and second homes, not for destroying your own blood. But as I sat across from my sister Meredith, watching her lawyers dismantle my life with surgical precision, I realized this was never about the inheritance. It was about control. She had spent a fortune to bury our father's secrets, but she never expected the man in the black suit to walk through those doors and dig them all back up. The phone call that ended my life as I knew it came at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday. I was sitting at my desk, staring at a spreadsheet that refused to balance, worrying about the cost of my upcoming car inspection. The ringer shattered the quiet hum of the office. It was a nurse from the hospice facility. She was kind, professional, and efficient. She told me my father was gone. I did not scream. I did not cry. I simply thanked her, hung up the phone, and looked out the window at the gray skyline of the city. I was 33 years old. I had spent the last decade rebuilding a life that felt small but safe, a life constructed carefully away from the shadow of my family. Now, that shadow had stretched out across the miles to claim me again. The funeral was held 3 days later. I wanted it to be simple. My father had been a complicated man, charming to strangers but deeply hollowed out by the demands of appearances, in his final years. Stripped of his business influence and his health, he had seemed to want quiet. I arranged for a small service at the chapel near the cemetery, invited his few remaining friends, and bought a modest spray of white lilies. I arrived early. I sat in the front row, smoothing the fabric of my dark gray dress, listening to the organist play a soft, wandering melody. I felt a heavy, dull ache in my chest, the kind of grief that is less about what you have lost and more about what you never really had. I was mourning the father I wished he had been, not just the man who had died. Then the doors at the back of the chapel opened, and the air in the room changed. My sister, Meredith, had arrived. She did not enter alone. She swept in like a weather front, flanked by a personal assistant, a driver, and 2 women I vaguely recognized as board members from her charity circuit. Meredith was wearing a black dress that likely cost more than my annual rent. It was tailored to within an inch of its life, sharp and severe, paired with oversized sunglasses she did not remove until she was halfway down the aisle. She looked stunning. She always did. Meredith had learned early on that beauty was a weapon and money was the ammunition. She walked past me without a glance, taking the seat on the other side of the aisle, effectively splitting the room into 2 camps. Her entourage filled the row behind her, their whispers creating a buzz of static that drowned out the organ. Throughout the service, Meredith dabbed at dry eyes with a lace handkerchief. She performed grief with the same intensity she applied to a hostile boardroom takeover. When the minister spoke about our father's kindness, she nodded solemnly, acting as though she had been by his bedside every day, rather than visiting once a year for a photo opportunity. I stared at the casket. I felt invisible. It was a feeling I was used to. After the service, I stood by the hearse, thanking the few genuine friends who had come. They were older men mostly, guys who had played golf with Dad before his hip gave out. They shook my hand with rough, warm grips and mumbled condolences. Allison, the voice was cool, melodious, and sharp as a razor. I turned to see Meredith standing 5 feet away. Her entourage had retreated to a waiting black SUV, leaving us alone on the gravel path. "You look tired," she said. It was not a statement of concern. It was an observation of weakness. "Hello." "Meredith," I said. I kept my voice steady. "Thank you for coming." She waved a manicured hand, dismissing my gratitude. He was my father too. "Allison, we do not need to pretend otherwise. Look, I know this is a difficult time. Emotions run high. People get confused. I am not confused." I said. Meredith stepped closer. The scent of her expensive perfume, something cold and floral, washed over me. "I want to make this easy for you. I know Dad's finances were a mess at the end. I know you are probably worried about how you're going to manage everything. I can manage." I said. "Can you?" she asked. Her eyes scanned me, lingering on my scuffed heels. I have spoken to the estate lawyers. It is going to be a long process. Probate is ugly. It is public. I want to spare you that. She reached into her clutch and pulled out a folded document. I have had my team draw up a settlement agreement, she said. A clean break. You sign a waiver disclaiming any interest in the estate, and I will write you a check today for $50,000. No courts, no lawyers, no fighting. You can go back to your life, and I will handle the cleanup. I stared at her. $50,000. It was a lot of money to me. But that wasn't the point. The point was the speed. The point was the pre-printed document in her hand, drafted before our father was even in the ground. Why would you do that? I asked. You do not even know what is in the will. Meredith smiled. It was a tight, practiced expression that did not reach her eyes. Does it matter? The estate is mostly debt and old furniture. I am offering you a lifeline. Take it. I stepped back. No, Meredith. The smile vanished. Excuse me. I said no. I repeated, my voice gaining a fraction more strength. I am the executor. Dad told me that much. I need to see the process through. It is not about money. It is about doing what he wanted. Meredith stared at me for a long moment. She didn't look angry. She looked amused. She looked like a cat watching a mouse try to negotiate its way out of a corner. You always were stubborn, she said softly. It is a pity. I really did want to help you. She slid the document back into her clutch. The click of the latch sounded like a gunshot in the quiet afternoon. Do not say I did not try. Allison, she said. She turned on her heel and walked toward the waiting SUV. As she climbed in, she looked back at me one last time. She smiled. It was a knowing smile, the kind you give someone when you know a secret that is about to destroy them. The engine roared, and she was gone, leaving me standing in a cloud of exhaust and dread. The next morning, I had an appointment with the estate attorney, a man named Arthur Henderson. His office was located in a strip mall on the edge of town, sandwiched between a dry cleaner and a payday loan center. It was a far cry from the high-rise firms Meredith used. Mr. Henderson was a small, round man who seemed to be sweating despite the air conditioning blasting in his office. He had a stack of files on his desk, but they looked disorganized, papers shuffling out of alignment. Miss Richardson, he said, standing up to shake my hand. His palm was damp. I am so sorry for your loss. Your father was a good client, a very specific client. Thank you, I said, taking the seat across from him. I just want to understand the next steps. Meredith mentioned, well, she seemed to think the estate was underwater. Henderson laughed nervously. He pulled a handkerchief from his pocket and dabbed his forehead. Oh, family. They always speculate. No, the will is quite straightforward. Very standard. He leaves the house and the residuals to you and your sister in equal shares. I am the executor, effectively, or rather, I am guiding you as the named executor. He began shuffling the papers on his desk, looking for something he couldn't seem to find. Straightforward, he repeated, almost to himself. Is there a problem? I asked. No, no problem, he said quickly. He stopped shuffling and looked at me. His eyes darted to the door, then back to me. There is, however, a procedural matter. There is a sealed attachment to the will. A sealed attachment? I asked. What does that mean? Henderson swallowed hard. It means there is a document your father included that is not to be read immediately. It has conditions. I cannot discuss it yet. Not until the probate is officially opened. He looked terrified. Mr. Henderson, I said, leaning forward, you look like you have seen a ghost. What is in that attachment? He jerked back as if I had shouted. Nothing, he said, his voice pitching up. I do not know. I should not have mentioned it. Forget I said anything. The will is straightforward. We just need to file the petition. He stood up abruptly. I have another meeting. Miss Richardson, I will be in touch. He practically ushered me out of the office. As I stood in the parking lot, blinking in the harsh sunlight, I felt a cold prickle on the back of my neck. Henderson was scared, and whatever was in that sealed attachment, it was the reason why. I drove back to my apartment in a daze. My home was a second-floor walk-up in a quiet, working-class neighborhood. It was my sanctuary. I had painted the walls a soft cream, filled the shelves with second-hand books, and covered the floors with rugs I had found at estate sales. It was not much, but it was mine. When I opened my mailbox in the lobby, it was jammed full, mostly junk mail, bills, and a stack of sympathy cards from people who had seen the obituary. I carried the bundle upstairs, dropped my keys on the console table, and sat on the sofa to sort through them. Card, bill, card, flyer for pizza. Then I froze. There was a plain white envelope in the middle of the stack. No return address. My name and address were printed on a label, crookedly applied. I tore it open. Inside there was a single sheet of paper. It was a photocopy, grainy and black and white. It looked like a police record. I squinted at the text. It was a misdemeanor arrest record from a town 2 counties over. The charge was shoplifting. The date was from 4 years ago. The name on the arrest record was Allison Richardson, but it was not me. I had never been arrested in my life. I had never even been to that town. I looked closely at the grainy mugshot in the corner. The woman looked vaguely like me. Dark hair, similar face shape, but it definitely was not me. My hands started to shake. Why would someone send me this? I turned the paper over. It was blank. There was no note, no explanation, just a false record of a crime I did not commit, sent to my home address. I felt a sudden wave of nausea. This was not an accident. This was a message. Someone wanted me to know that they were watching and that they were willing to play dirty. I thought of Meredith's smile at the funeral. I want to make this easy for you. I shoved the paper back into the envelope and threw it into the trash, but the feeling of violation lingered, hanging in the air like smoke. The next day, I went back to work. I worked as a project manager for a mid-sized logistics firm. It was not glamorous, but I was good at it. I liked the order of it. I liked making things fit where they were supposed to go. I had barely sat down at my desk when my internal messenger pinged. It was the HR director. Linda, please come to my office immediately. My stomach dropped. Linda and I had a friendly relationship. She usually sent emojis or asked about my weekend. This was formal. This was cold. I walked to her office, my heels clicking on the linoleum. When I entered, Linda did not smile. She was sitting behind her desk, looking at a printout. My direct manager, David, was sitting in the corner, looking at the floor. Close the door. Allison, Linda said. I closed it and sat down. Is everything okay? I asked. Linda slid the paper across the desk. We received an email this morning, an anonymous tip. It claims that you falsified your credentials when you applied for this job 3 years ago. I stared at her. That is ridiculous. You checked my references. You have my transcripts. The email claims that the university transcripts were forged. Linda said, it provides specific details about a disciplinary hearing during your sophomore year that resulted in expulsion. I felt the blood drain from my face. I did have a disciplinary hearing in my sophomore year. It was a minor misunderstanding about a dorm room violation, and it was dismissed. I was never expelled. I graduated with honors, but only my family knew about that hearing. I had been so ashamed at the time, terrified of disappointing my father, that I had called Meredith crying. She was the only person I had ever told. This is a lie, I said, my voice trembling. I have my degree. I can prove it. We will need to verify that, David said, finally looking up. His eyes were guarded. He looked at me like he was seeing a stranger. The email also mentioned financial irregularities in your previous role. Financial irregularities. I repeated, I have never touched the company accounts. We have to take this seriously. Allison, Linda said, until we can conduct a full investigation, we are going to have to limit your access to the system. You are suspending me. I asked. Administrative leave. She corrected, paid. For now. But you need to hand over your badge and your laptop. I looked from Linda to David. I saw the doubt in their eyes. The seed had been planted. Even if I proved it was all a lie, the stain would remain. They would always wonder. I stood up, my legs feeling like lead. I took off my badge and placed it on the desk. "I will clear this up," I said. David nodded, but he did not say anything. I walked out of the building carrying a cardboard box with my personal mug and a framed photo of my cat. I felt naked. I felt exposed. Meredith was not just coming for the inheritance. She was coming for my life. I arrived home to find a process server waiting on my stoop. He was a bored-looking man in a windbreaker who handed me a thick stack of documents. "You have been served," he mumbled, and walked away. I sat on the stairs of my apartment building and flipped through the pages. It was a petition filed in the probate court. Meredith was challenging the validity of the will. The legal language was dense, but the accusations were clear. She was alleging undue influence. She claimed that in the final months of his life, our father had been mentally incompetent and that I had manipulated him into naming me as an executor. She was also alleging that I was unfit to serve as executor due to a history of instability and poor financial judgment. I laughed, a harsh, dry sound that echoed in the stairwell. I had been the one paying my own bills since I was 22. Meredith had never paid a bill in her life that wasn't covered by a trust fund or a husband she had later divorced. But the most chilling part was the timing. I hadn't even filed the will yet. Mr. Henderson had barely opened the file. Meredith had launched a preemptive strike. She was controlling the narrative before the story had even begun. By the time I got into court, I wouldn't be the grieving daughter. I would be the defendant. I went inside and threw the papers on my kitchen table. I needed to talk to her. I needed to make her stop. I dialed her number. She answered on the second ring. "Hello, Allison." Her voice was calm, serene. "Meredith, what are you doing?" I asked. I was shaking, gripping the phone so hard my knuckles were white. "I just got served." "You are suing me?" "We have not even read the will yet." "I told you." "Allison," she said, "I offered you a clean break. You chose the hard way. This is insane." I said, "You know Dad was sound of mind. You know I never asked him for anything. Why are you doing this?" "Allison, you sound hysterical." She said, "I am not hysterical." I snapped. "I am angry. You are trying to ruin my reputation. You sent that email to my boss, didn't you?" "I have no idea what you are talking about," Meredith said smoothly. "But if you are having trouble at work, that only supports my concern that you are not in a position to handle the estate. You are under a lot of stress. It is understandable." "Stop it," I said. "Stop gaslighting me. I know it was you. You are the only one who knew about the dorm hearing." There was a pause. Then Meredith's voice dropped an octave. It became warmer, sadder. "Allison, I am just trying to protect Dad's legacy and protect you from yourself. You have always been fragile." "I am not fragile." I shouted. "Thank you," she said abruptly. Her tone snapped back to icy professional. "What?" I asked. "Thank you," she repeated. "This helps." Then the line went dead. I stared at the phone. She had been recording me. She had baited me into shouting, into sounding unstable. While she remained calm and reasonable, she would play that tape for a judge. She would play it for the family friends. Listen to poor Allison. She is unraveling. I felt a scream building in my throat, but I swallowed it down. Screaming was what she wanted. I had to be smarter. I had to see what she was hiding. I grabbed my car keys and drove to my father's house. It was a 40-minute drive to the suburbs. The house was a sprawling colonial set back from the road. Surrounded by oak trees, it had always felt too big for us, especially after Mom died. When I pulled into the driveway, I saw a chain across the entrance. A sign hung from it. "Private property. Security enforced." I got out of the car and stepped over the chain. I still had my key, technically, as the executor named in the will. I had a right to be here. I walked up the long driveway. The house looked dark. The curtains were drawn. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The air was stale. It smelled of dust and lemon polish. "Hello?" I called out. Silence. I walked into the living room. The furniture was there. covered in plastic sheets, but the small items, the silver picture frames, the antique clock, the crystal vases, were gone. I moved to the hallway and headed for my father's study. This was where he kept everything: his desk, his files, his life. I pushed the door open and stopped. The room had been stripped. The mahogany desk was bare. The filing cabinets that used to line the wall were gone, leaving rectangular indentations in the carpet. The bookshelves were empty, wiped clean of dust. I walked to the wall behind the desk. My father had kept a wall safe there, hidden behind a large oil painting of a ship at sea. The painting was gone, and the safe was gone. There was just a patch of lighter-colored paint on the wall and a hole where the safe had been anchored. I ran my hand over the wall. They hadn't just taken the papers. They had taken the steel box that held them. My heart hammered against my ribs. Meredith had secured the house immediately after he died. She must have had a crew in here within hours. What was she so afraid of? If the estate was just debt and old furniture, why strip the office to the bone? I turned in a circle, looking at the empty room. It felt like a crime scene, a distinct, premeditated erasure of history. I checked the drawers of the desk. Empty, not even a paperclip. I went to the kitchen. The drawers there were empty too. The junk drawer, usually overflowing with rubber bands and old receipts, was vacuumed clean. She had sanitized his life. I left the house. Locking the door behind me, I felt watched. I looked up at the security cameras mounted on the eaves. They were new. The red lights were blinking. She was watching me right now. I drove home in silence. The sun was setting, casting long, bruised shadows across the highway. I felt small. I felt outgunned. I had no lawyer, no access to the records, and my job was hanging by a thread. Meredith had money, power, and a head start. I got back to my apartment and locked the door. Throwing the deadbolt and the chain, I closed the blinds. I sat on my couch in the dark, my phone glowing in my hand. I opened my social media app, looking for a distraction, something to numb the panic rising in my chest. A notification popped up, a message request. It was from a profile with no photo and no name, just a default gray avatar. I opened the message. "Stop digging. Take the offer. This is bigger than you." I stared at the words. They were written in capital letters, screaming in the silence of my living room. My breath caught in my throat. This wasn't just Meredith being difficult. This wasn't just a sisterly squabble over money. This is bigger than you. I looked at the locked door of my apartment. It suddenly felt very flimsy. I put the phone face down on the coffee table. I pulled my knees up to my chest and wrapped my arms around them. I listened to the sounds of the building, the hum of the refrigerator, the footsteps of the neighbor upstairs. I did not sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the empty wall where the safe had been, and the man in the black suit who I sensed was coming, though I did not know him yet. I only knew that the war had started, and I was already losing. I needed a lawyer, and I knew I could not afford the kind my sister had. Meredith hired firms with names etched in glass on the 42nd floor of downtown skyscrapers. I needed someone who worked on the ground, someone who wasn't afraid to get mud on their shoes. I found Elias Thorne in a brick walk-up 3 blocks from the county courthouse. His office smelled of old paper and stale coffee, and his suit was a shade of brown that had gone out of fashion 20 years ago. But his eyes were sharp, clear gray and unblinking, and his desk was organized with a military precision that calmed my fraying nerves. He listened to me for 40 minutes without interrupting. He took notes on a yellow legal pad, his pen scratching rhythmically. When I finished telling him about the funeral, the settlement offer, the stripped house, and the threatening message, he set the pen down and folded his hands. "Here is the truth. Allison," he said. His voice was gravelly, worn down by decades of arguing with judges. "Your sister can outspend you. She can bury us in motions until you run out of money to pay me, and then she will win by default. That is her strategy. It is called a war of attrition." I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. "So what do we do?" I asked. "Do I just give up?" "No," Elias said. We do not play her game. We do not fight over every little motion. We focus on procedure. We force disclosures. We make it expensive for her to hide things. Not expensive for us to find them. He leaned forward. If she stripped the house, she is hiding assets. If she is hiding assets, she is vulnerable. We are going to be annoying. Allison, we are going to be the pebble in her shoe that she cannot shake loose. But I need you to be ready. They are going to come after your character. They are going to try to make you look crazy. Can you handle that? I thought about the fake arrest record in my mailbox. I thought about the silence in my father's empty study. I have nothing left to lose. I said. Elias nodded. Good. Because looking at what you have told me, I do not think this is just about money anymore. This is about survival. The first hearing was scheduled for a rainy Thursday morning. The courthouse was a cavernous building of gray stone, echoing with the sounds of footsteps and hushed conversations. I walked in with Elias, clutching my purse against my side like a shield. Meredith was already there. She sat at the plaintiff's table, looking like a tragic heroine from a black-and-white movie. She wore a simple charcoal suit, minimal makeup, and a posture of brave resignation. She was flanked by 3 lawyers in sharp blue suits. They looked like sharks in a tank, sleek and dangerous. The judge, a stern woman named Judge Calloway, called the session to order. Meredith's lead attorney, a man with silver hair and a voice like poured oil, stood up. Your Honor, he began, we are here with a heavy heart. My client, Ms. Richardson, simply wants to ensure that her late father's true wishes are honored. We believe the decedent was subject to undue influence in his final months, and given the respondent's history, we feel it is imperative that the court intervene to protect the estate. I stiffened. The respondent, that was me. Elias stood up slowly. Your Honor, there is no evidence of undue influence. The decedent was lucid until the end. Ms. Allison Richardson is the named executor. This petition is a delay tactic. Meredith's lawyer sighed. A theatrical sound of patience tested. Your Honor, we do not wish to air family laundry, he said, glancing at me with pity. But there are patterns of conflict here, past incidents of instability that give us pause. We simply ask that the court freeze all assets until we can fully investigate the circumstances of the will. He did not say what the incidents were. He did not have to. The insinuation hung in the air, heavy and toxic. He was painting a picture of me as the volatile, troubled sister, and Meredith as the steady, responsible one. Elias did not take the bait. He ignored the personal attacks. Your Honor, Elias said, we request that the court unseal the attachment to the will immediately. The estate attorney, Mr. Henderson, has indicated it contains crucial instructions. Meredith's team moved as one. The silver-haired lawyer was on his feet instantly. Objection, Your Honor. That attachment is private correspondence. It is irrelevant to the question of the will's validity. It contains sensitive family matters that should not be part of the public record at this stage. I watched them. They were terrified. The panic was subtle. A shifting of papers, a tightening of jaws. But it was there, if the attachment was irrelevant. Why fight so hard to keep it hidden? Judge Calloway looked over her spectacles at Meredith's table. If it is part of the testamentary documents, Counsel, it is relevant, she said. I will review it in chambers. I will determine if it should be unsealed. Meredith's lawyer looked like he wanted to argue, but he bowed his head. Thank you, Your Honor. The hearing ended with a procedural whimper. The judge ordered a temporary freeze on asset distribution, but allowed me to remain as the tentative executor for administrative purposes only. It was a draw, but as I walked out of the courtroom, I realized the war was being fought on 2 fronts. I pushed open the heavy double doors of the courthouse. Stepping out into the drizzle, Elias was saying something about filing a motion for inventory, but I stopped listening. A bright light flashed in my face. Ms. Richardson! Ms. Richardson! I blinked. Blinded, a young man with a smartphone on a stabilizer was shoving the camera inches from my nose. He was wearing a hoodie and looked like a college student, but his eyes were predatory. "Is it true you have a criminal record?" he shouted. I recoiled, stepping back into Elias. "What? Are you under investigation for fraud?" the man persisted, stepping closer. "Sources say you were fired for embezzlement. Is that why you are fighting your sister for the money? Get that camera out of her face," Elias barked, stepping between us. The man didn't flinch. He kept the lens trained on me. The public has a right to know if the executor is a criminal. I felt the blood drain from my face. People on the steps were stopping to watch. A security guard was looking over, but making no move to intervene. "I do not have a criminal record." I stammered. "That is a lie." The man smirked. He had what he wanted, a clip of me looking terrified, defensive, and guilty. "We are leaving," Elias said, grabbing my arm and steering me toward the parking lot. "Do not say another word." We walked briskly to his car. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. "Who was that?" I asked, my voice shaking. "A bottom feeder," Elias said grimly. "A local blogger. He covers court gossip. Someone tipped him off. Someone told him where to be and what to ask." "Meredith," I whispered. "She is trying to break you." "Allison," Elias said as we got into his car. "She is shaping the story before the facts even come out. By the time we get to trial, she wants the whole town to think you are a thief." I looked out the window as we drove away. The rain smeared the city into gray streaks. I felt a cold, hard clarity settling in my chest. She wasn't just fighting me legally. She was trying to erase me socially. She wanted to make me radioactive. The fallout was immediate. The next morning, I went to work hoping for a distraction. The office was quiet. Too quiet. People stopped talking when I walked past the break room. Eyes averted. Conversations died. I sat at my desk and tried to log in. Access denied. I stared at the screen. I tried again. Access denied. "Allison." I looked up. Linda from HR was standing there. She didn't look friendly anymore. She looked tired. "We need to talk," she said. She didn't take me to her office. She took me to a small conference room near the exit. It felt like a quarantine zone. "We have been contacted by several concerned parties," Linda said, clasping her hands on the table. "There are allegations circulating online. Questions about your background. It is a blog." "Linda," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "It is gossip. My sister is suing me. She is trying to smear me. None of it is true. It is creating a reputational risk for the firm." Linda said, "We have clients who are asking questions. We cannot have this kind of noise attached to our project managers. So that is it." I asked, "You are firing me because of a rumor." "We are extending your administrative leave," she said, "indefinitely, pending the outcome of your legal issues." She slid a cardboard box across the table. "We packed your personal effects. We need your badge." I looked at the box. It held my stapler, my spare sweater, and the framed photo of my cat. It was my entire professional identity, reduced to cardboard. I stood up. I felt a strange sensation. I expected to feel crushed. I expected to cry, but instead, I felt lighter. The worst thing that could happen at work had happened. The threat was gone because the damage was done. I took off my badge and dropped it on the table. It made a hollow plastic clatter. "You are making a mistake," I said. Linda didn't answer. She just looked at the door. I picked up my box and walked out. I walked past my desk, past the break room, past the reception desk. I walked out into the bright, indifferent sunlight of the parking lot. I was unemployed. I was under siege. I was being hunted by my own sister, and for the first time in my life, I was absolutely furious. I put the box in my trunk and drove to a diner on the edge of town. I needed to think. I needed to stop reacting and start acting. I called Elias. They suspended me indefinitely. I told him, "I am sorry." "Allison," he said, "do not be." I said, "Now I have free time. What do we do next?" "We need to find the assets." Elias said, "I have been digging into the court filings. The will lists a professional trustee for the family trust, a man named Marcus Sterling. I have never heard of him." I said, Exactly, Elias said. He is not local. He is based in the capital. I have tried to call him, but he refuses to speak to me. He says there are conflict rules because of the litigation. He is routing all documents through Meredith's lawyers. That is illegal, isn't it? I asked. As executor, I should have access. It is gray, Elias admitted, but it smells wrong. A trustee is supposed to be neutral. This guy is acting like he works for her. We need to find out why. I hung up and ordered coffee. I sat there, staring at the steam rising from the cup. I needed information that wasn't in the legal files. I needed someone who knew my father before the sickness, before Meredith took over. I thought of the funeral, the men shaking my hand, the golf buddies. There was one name I remembered, Frank Miller. He had been my father's business partner 30 years ago. Before they had a falling out, Dad hadn't spoken to him in years. But Frank had come to the funeral. He had looked genuinely sad. I found his number in the phone book. He was old school. And called him. Frank, this is Allison Richardson. There was a pause. Allison, I was wondering if you would call. Can I buy you a cup of coffee? I asked. I met him at a park bench near the river. Frank was a heavy-set man with white hair and a face lined by sun and worry. He was feeding pigeons with a bag of stale bread. He didn't look at me at first. He just threw a handful of crumbs on the ground. Your sister is a piece of work, Frank said. You heard. I asked. I still have friends at the club. Frank said. She is telling everyone you had a breakdown. Says she is trying to get you help. I laughed bitterly. Is that what they call it? Frank turned to look at me. His eyes were kind but serious. Listen to me. Allison, your father and I, we didn't end on good terms. He was too obsessed with image. He let money eat his soul. But the last time I saw him, about 6 months ago, he looked scared. Scared of what? I asked. He wouldn't say. Frank said, but he asked me if I knew any lawyers in the next state over. Someone who wasn't connected to the local network. He said Meredith was spending money she didn't have. He said she was leveraging things that shouldn't be leveraged. Did he say what things? I pressed. Frank shook his head. No, but he said he was going to lock something away. He said, I need to put it where she cannot find the key. I felt a shiver run down my spine. The empty wall safe. Frank, I asked, did he ever mention a foundation or a trust I didn't know about? He mentioned a lot of things. Frank said, but the one thing he kept repeating was the anchor. He said he had to protect the anchor. I thought he meant a boat, but he never owned a boat. The anchor. I filed the name away in my mind. Thank you. Frank, I said. He patted my hand. Be careful. Kid, Meredith isn't doing this alone. You don't pull strings like this without help from high places. I drove back to Elias's office with a renewed sense of purpose. Frank's warning about help from high places echoed what Elias had said about the trustee. Elias was waiting for me with a stack of papers. We got a partial inventory from Meredith's team. He said, it is a joke. It is barely 2 pages. But look at this. He pointed to a line item near the bottom. Assets previously transferred to the Richardson Family Trust. See Schedule A. Where is Schedule A? I asked. Elias grimaced. That is the problem. They didn't include it. They claim it is a privileged document because the trust is a private entity. But here is the kicker. The transfer date. He pointed to the date. It was 3 years ago. 3 years ago. I said, that was right after Dad got sick, and right when Meredith took over his medical power of attorney. Elias noted, but you were never notified. If you are a beneficiary of that trust, you legally had to be notified of the transfer, so they forged my signature. I whispered, or they just ignored the law. Elias tapped the paper. I think they ignored it because they never expected anyone to check. They thought you would take the $50,000 and walk away. He flipped to another page. And there is this. I subpoenaed your father's primary checking account for the last 12 months. Look at the recurring payments. I scanned the list. Utility bills, medical copays, groceries, and then, once a month, a payment of $4,000 to Omega Consulting, LLC. $4,000 a month. I said, for what? Dad didn't have a business anymore. I looked up the LLC, Elias said. The address is a mail drop in a strip mall 3 towns over. It is a box in a UPS store, and the signing agent for the LLC is a name I have never seen before. A man named Silas Vane. Silas Vane. I repeated. It sounded like a name from a bad novel. I searched the Bar Association registry. Elias said, no lawyer by that name. I searched the state business licenses. Nothing. The LLC exists only to receive these checks. Is it blackmail? I asked. Or a payoff? Elias said, or money laundering. Whatever it is. It stopped the day your father died. I stared at the name. Omega Consulting. It felt cold. Anonymous. I need to go to that mail drop. I said. Elias shook his head. No, you stay away. We hire a private investigator for that. If this is criminal, Allison, you do not want to be the one knocking on the door. I left his office as the sun was going down. The city felt different now. It wasn't just my home anymore. It was a landscape of hidden traps and buried secrets. The streets seemed darker, the shadows longer. I drove home, exhausted. My head was throbbing. I just wanted to take a hot shower and sleep for 12 hours. I parked my car and walked up the stairs to my apartment. I reached for my keys, but then I stopped. My door was unlocked. I knew I had locked it. I vividly remembered throwing the deadbolt and the chain. The door was ajar. Open just a crack. A sliver of darkness visible from the hallway. My heart slammed against my ribs. I stood there, frozen. Should I run? Should I call the police? But a strange, reckless curiosity took hold of me. I pushed the door open with my fingertips. Hello? I called out, my voice trembling. Silence. I reached inside and flipped the light switch. The apartment looked normal. The TV was there. My laptop was on the coffee table. My purse was still by the door where I had left it earlier. I walked in slowly, checking the corners. The kitchen was untouched. The bedroom was undisturbed. But then I went to my small desk in the corner of the living room. I had left a stack of bills and medical paperwork there in a neat pile. Now, the pile was scattered, and one specific file folder was open. It was the folder containing the copies of the will and the funeral arrangements. Someone had been here. They hadn't taken the laptop. They hadn't taken the jewelry in my bedroom. They hadn't taken the cash in the jar on the counter. They had come for the paper. They were looking for what I knew. I felt a violation deeper than if they had trashed the place. This was precise. This was professional. This was a message. We can get in. We can see what you have. I backed away from the desk. I felt the air in the apartment growing thin, suffocating. I grabbed a chair and wedged it under the doorknob. I checked the windows. I double-checked the locks. But I knew it didn't matter. A lock was just a suggestion to people like this. I sat on the floor with my back against the wall. Dialing Elias's number, my hands were shaking so hard I could barely hit the buttons. Elias, I whispered when he answered. Allison, what is wrong? Someone was in my apartment. I said, get out of there, he said immediately. Go to a hotel. No, I said, that is what they want. They want me to run. They want me to be scared. Allison, I am staying. Elias. But listen to me. They were looking for papers. They think I have something. What do you mean? He asked. Frank mentioned the anchor. I said, and Dad mentioned a key. If they were searching my apartment, it means they haven't found it yet. It means Meredith doesn't have everything. I looked at the scattered papers on my desk. We are winning. Elias, I said, a strange, hysterical laugh bubbling up in my throat. We are winning because they are panicked. I hung up the phone. I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark, watching the door, waiting for the sun to rise. I was terrified. Yes, but I was also awake. For the first time in years, I was fully, painfully awake, and I knew one thing for certain. I was going to find that key. The morning after the break-in, I did not go to the police. I went to Elias. I sat in his office, the adrenaline of the night before having curdled into a cold, hard resolve. I told him about the open file, the unpicked lock, the silence of the apartment that felt like a threat. Elias listened, his face grim. He did not tell me I was imagining things. He did not ask if I had just forgotten to lock the door. He simply pulled a fresh legal pad from his drawer and uncapped his pen. "We are filing an emergency motion," he said. "Today, we are going to argue that the estate assets, including physical records, are in immediate danger of dissipation or destruction. We are going to demand a preservation order." We filed it at noon. By 2:00, Meredith's team had responded. They did not just oppose our motion, they filed a counter-motion. They argued that my behavior, my erratic filing of emergency motions based on unsubstantiated paranoia about break-ins, proved that I was a danger to the estate. They requested that the court freeze my access entirely. They labeled me a security risk. Reading the brief was like looking at a funhouse mirror reflection of myself. They took my fear and twisted it into instability. They took my diligence and twisted it into harassment. They cited the anonymous complaints to my employer. They cited the public concern raised by the blog post. They built a cage out of their own lies and tried to lock me inside it. The judge, perhaps tired of the drama or perhaps just cautious, split the baby. She denied Meredith's request to remove me completely, but she also denied our request for a full forensic freeze. Instead, she ordered limited discovery. She gave Meredith's team 10 days to produce the financial records we had asked for. It felt like a victory. For about 10 days, on the 11th day, the boxes arrived at Elias's office. There were 6 of them, heavy cardboard banker's boxes stacked in the corner. I stared at them, feeling a surge of hope. This was it. The truth, the numbers. Elias opened the first box. He pulled out a sheaf of papers. He frowned. He pulled out another. Then another. He held one up to the light. "Look at this," he said. I looked. It was a photocopy of a bank statement, but it was illegible. The toner was too dark. The edges cut off. The numbers were black smears. I picked up another sheet. It was a spreadsheet, but the columns had been redacted so heavily it looked like a classified government document. Account number, redacted. Payee, redacted. Amount, redacted. "It is garbage," I said, my voice rising. "This is useless." "It is malicious compliance," Elias said, throwing the paper back into the box. "They produced the documents, technically, but they made sure we could not read them. If we want readable copies, we have to file a motion to compel. We have to go back to court. We have to argue why this isn't good enough, and that costs money." I said. Elias nodded. "That costs billable hours. That costs filing fees. They are bleeding you. Allison, they are making you pay $1,000 to find out that a $10 check was written to the electric company." I sank into the chair. I looked at the boxes. They weren't filled with answers. They were filled with obstacles. "I will go through them." I said, "I have time. I am not working. Remember, I will look at every single page with a magnifying glass if I have to." So that is what I did, for 3 days. I sat in a spare room at Elias's office, swimming through a sea of gray, blurry paper. My eyes ached. My fingers were stained with ink. It was during this time that my phone rang. The caller ID said, "Sterling Trust Management." I answered it, my heart jumping. This was the trustee, the ghost. "Hello," I said. "This is Allison, Ms. Richardson," a woman's voice said. She sounded bored, efficient. "This is the office of Marcus Sterling. We are conducting a routine verification of all beneficiaries associated with the Richardson file. We need to update our compliance records." "Okay," I said, grabbing a pen. "I have been trying to reach Mr. Sterling for weeks. Mr. Sterling is unavailable," the woman said, cutting me off. "I just need to ask you a few standard questions. For the file, go ahead. Current employment status, unemployed," I said, feeling the sting of it. "Reason for termination." I was not terminated. I said, "I am on administrative leave. Reason for leave. There are pending legal matters." I heard the sound of typing. It was loud, deliberate. "Have you ever been treated for a psychological disorder?" she asked. I froze. "Excuse me, have you ever been treated for anxiety?" depression, bipolar disorder, or schizophrenia? She repeated. It is a standard question for beneficiary capacity. That is none of your business. I said, and what does that have to do with the trust? Capacity is a central concern of the trust instrument. She recited, have you ever been hospitalized for emotional distress? No, I snapped. Have you ever been prescribed antipsychotic medication? No. Do you have any outstanding debts exceeding $10,000? No. Are you currently involved in any litigation regarding fraud or embezzlement? I am the victim of a smear campaign. I said, my voice shaking, who gave you these questions? Did Meredith tell you to ask this? We are just updating the file. Ms. Richardson, she said. Her voice remained flat, robotic. Thank you for your cooperation. We will note your responses. She hung up before I could ask another question. I sat there, holding the dead phone. That wasn't a verification. That was an interrogation. They were building a profile. Unemployed, unstable, litigious, defensive. They were going to use my answers to argue that I wasn't fit to receive a dime. The pressure was coming from all sides. A few days later, the court appointed a special master to oversee the discovery dispute. This was supposed to be a neutral third party, an experienced lawyer who would act as a referee so the judge didn't have to deal with our daily squabbles. His name was Harold Pallow. He was a man in his 60s with a ruddy face and a laugh that was too loud. We met in a conference room at the courthouse. Meredith wasn't there, but her lead attorney, the silver-haired shark, was Mr. Pallow shook hands with Meredith's lawyer like they were old fraternity brothers. They asked about each other's golf handicap. They joked about a mutual friend's divorce. Then Pallow turned to me. He didn't shake my hand. He just gestured for me to sit. Now, young lady, he said. He actually called me young lady. I have looked at the file, and I have to tell you, I am seeing a lot of wasted paper here. We are just trying to get readable documents. Elias said stiffly. The production they sent was illegible. Pallow waved a hand. Photocopies are never perfect. Elias, you know that. We are not looking for high art here. We are looking for numbers. We can't read the numbers. Elias said. Pallow sighed. He looked at me with a mixture of pity and annoyance. Ms. Richardson, let me give you some advice. Free of charge. Litigation is an ugly business. It tears families apart. I see it every day. You are chasing shadows. You are looking for conspiracies where there is just sloppiness. It is not sloppiness. I said, it is deliberate. Pallow leaned back in his chair. See, that is what I mean. That mindset. It is not helpful. You need to accept reality. Your father made his choices. Your sister is trying to administer the estate. You are throwing wrenches in the gears. If you continue to demand perfection, you are going to drain this estate dry, and you will end up with nothing. Is that what you want? I want the truth. I said. Pallow chuckled. The truth. Lawyers love that word. But in probate, the truth is usually just a ledger. My recommendation to the judge is going to be that the current discovery is sufficient. You can depose the accountant if you want, but I am not going to order a reproduction of 10,000 pages just because the toner was low. He stood up. Meeting adjourned. I walked out of that room feeling like I had been slapped. The system wasn't broken. It was working exactly as it was designed. It was designed to protect the people who played golf together. It was designed to crush the people who didn't. But Elias wasn't done. He was angry now. 2. Pallow's dismissal had offended his professional pride. He went back to the garbage documents with a magnifying glass. And late one night, he found something. Allison, come here, he called out. I walked over to his desk. He had 2 pieces of paper side by side. One was a transfer document from 3 years ago, moving a significant sum of stock into the family trust. The other was an old check my father had written to a contractor. Look at the signature, Elias said. I looked. They both said Robert Richardson. They looked identical. That is the problem, Elias said. They are too identical. What do you mean? I asked. No one signs their name exactly the same way twice. Elias explained. There are always microscopic variations. The loop of the R, the pressure of the dot on the I. But look, he pulled out a transparency sheet. He had traced the signature from the transfer document onto it. He laid the transparency over the check. It was a perfect match. Every line, every curve. It is a trace, Elias said. Someone took this check, or one just like it, and traced the signature onto the transfer document. This transfer is a forgery. I felt a jolt of electricity. This was it. This was the smoking gun. We have them. I said. Not yet, Elias said, rubbing his eyes. I am not a handwriting expert. Paolo will say I am seeing things. We need a forensic document examiner. We need an expert report. How much? I asked. $5,000. Elias said, minimum, and if we want him to testify, it is another 5. I checked my bank account balance in my head. I had $3,000 left to my name. I don't have it, I said quietly. Elias looked at me. He looked at the signature. I will front the cost, he said. You will? I asked, shocked. I hate being lied to. Elias said, and I hate Harold Paolo. We are getting that expert. The next day, my phone pinged. A text message from Meredith. Lunch? Pierre's, 12 o'clock. Just us. Please. I showed it to Elias. It is a trap, he said. I know. I said, but I want to see her face. I want to see if she knows about the signature yet. I wore my best suit, the one I used to wear for client presentations. I put on lipstick. I walked into Pierre's, the most expensive French restaurant in the city, with my head high. Meredith was waiting at a corner table. She looked effortless, wearing a silk blouse that shimmered in the ambient light. She stood up to hug me. I let her, my body stiff as a board. You look good. Allison, she said, sitting down, a little thin, maybe. Are you eating? I am eating fine. Meredith, I said, I am just busy. Reading documents takes a lot of time. She sighed and signaled the waiter. She ordered sparkling water. I ordered the same. Allison, she said, folding her hands on the pristine white tablecloth. This has to stop. It is embarrassing. It is undignified. I agree. I said, so stop hiding the assets. Stop sending fake police records to my house. Meredith's face didn't change. She looked at me with a terrifying softness. I didn't send anything to your house, she said, but I heard about the break-in. That must have been frightening. It proves what I've been saying. You are vulnerable living there alone. You are under too much stress. I am not vulnerable. I said, I am trying to protect you, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. You do not understand the forces involved here, Dad. Dad had debts. He had obligations. If you keep digging, you are going to expose things that will ruin his memory, and you are going to get hurt. Is that a threat? I asked. It is a reality, she said. Look around. Allison, you are out of your depth. I looked around. I saw the waiters moving silently. I saw the wealthy patrons eating their salads, and then I saw him. At the table directly to my right, a man was sitting alone. He was reading a newspaper, but he wasn't reading it. He was holding it too still. And on the table, next to his coffee cup, was a phone. It was face down, but the camera lens was pointed directly at us. I recognized him. He was the man who had been parked across the street from my apartment building 2 nights ago. You brought a private investigator, I said, my voice loud. Meredith didn't flinch. I do not know what you are talking about. The man at the next table. I said, pointing, he is recording us. Just like you recorded our phone call. This isn't a truce. This is a setup. You want me to say something angry. You want me to make a scene in a nice restaurant. Meredith smiled. A small, tight smile. You are making a scene right now. Allison, she said, everyone is looking. I looked around. People were staring. I realized how it looked. The calm, elegant woman and the sister with the raised voice and the accusing finger. I stood up. My chair scraped loudly against the floor. You can pay for the water, I said, and tell your spy he needs to work on his blending in. He is wearing the same tie he wore on Tuesday. I walked out. I was shaking. But I wasn't shaking from fear. I was shaking from adrenaline. She was scared. She was bringing Pias to lunch. She was desperate to shut me down. I went back to Elias's office. The handwriting expert had been hired. But we needed more. We needed to know where the money went. I spent the next 3 days hunting the ghost of the Omega Consulting LLC. We had subpoenaed the bank records for the LLC. It took a fight. But we got them. The statements were illuminating. My father's payments of $4,000 came in on the 1st of the month. On the 2nd of the month, the exact same amount was transferred out. It went to an investment account at a firm called Vantage Point Capital. I looked up Vantage Point Capital. It was a boutique wealth management firm. I looked up the leadership. The vice president of private wealth was a man named Julian Thorne. No relation to Elias. I searched for Julian Thorne's social media. He had a public Instagram. It was full of pictures of sailboats, ski trips, and charity galas. And there, in a photo from 6 months ago, was Julian Thorne at a gala for the Richardson Family Foundation. He was standing next to Meredith. His arm was around her waist. They were laughing. The caption read, "Celebrating another successful year of giving with the brilliant Meredith Richardson." I showed it to Elias. Her financial advisor is receiving the money that was drained from Dad's account. I said, "And he is on the board of the foundation." Elias said, looking at the screen, "We looked at the foundation's tax filings, public records for nonprofits. The Richardson Family Foundation had given out 3 grants in the last 2 years, all of them to organizations with names like the Green Earth Initiative and Scholars for Tomorrow." I Googled them. The Green Earth Initiative had no website. Its address was a P.O. box in Nevada. Scholars for Tomorrow had a website, but it was full of stock photos and Latin filler text. The donate button didn't work. They are fake. I said, "The charities are fake. She is moving the money from the estate, through the foundation, to these fake charities, and then, where? Back to Julian Thorne," Elias guessed, "or back to Meredith. It is a circle, a washing machine for money. It was a massive fraud. It wasn't just stealing from me, it was tax evasion. It was money laundering. But we had to prove it, and we had to prove my father wasn't part of it. That night, I sat in my apartment, staring at the wall. I was tired. I was broke. I was eating ramen noodles because I couldn't afford groceries. My friends had stopped calling, awkward and unsure of what to say to the woman who was suing her sister. I looked at the stack of documents on my table. The new will, the transfer documents, the letters from the lawyers, they all looked so official, so final. I picked up the photocopy of the codicil, the one Meredith claimed didn't exist, but which we found referenced in the journal, or rather, the photocopy of the withdrawal of the codicil. It was dated 6 months ago. It was typed on crisp, white letterhead. I stared at it. Something was nagging at me. Something about the paper. My father was a creature of habit. He was a man of rituals. One of his rituals was his correspondence. He never wrote personal instructions on white paper. For business, yes. For contracts, yes. But for anything involving family, letters to me, notes to Meredith, instructions for the house. He used yellow legal stationery, always. He said white paper was for strangers. Yellow paper was for truth. I frantically dug through my box of keepsakes. I found a birthday card he had written me last year. Yellow envelope, yellow note card. I found a list of chores he had left me when I was 20. Yellow legal pad paper. I looked at the personal instructions regarding the withdrawal of the codicil. It was on white, bond paper, and the signature. It looked real. But the medium was wrong. My father would never have signed a document disinheriting his daughter or changing his final wishes on stranger paper. He would have written it out by hand, on yellow paper. Meredith didn't know that. She knew about the money. She knew about the accounts. But she didn't know the small, intimate habits of the man she was erasing. She had forged the documents using the wrong paper. It wasn't legal proof yet, but it was moral proof. It was the anchor I needed. I wasn't crazy. I was right. I felt a sudden urge to be close to him, not the version of him Meredith was selling, but the real him. I grabbed my car keys. I drove to the house, It was late, past midnight. The chain was still across the driveway. The no trespassing sign was still there. I didn't care. I parked down the street and walked through the woods that bordered the property. I knew the path. I had built a fort there when I was 10. I slipped through the trees and emerged in the backyard. The house loomed dark and silent. I didn't go to the front door. I went to the detached garage. The workshop. Meredith hated the workshop. It was dirty, smelly, and full of junk. She had probably never set foot in it since she was 12. I used my key, the one key I still had that worked, to open the side door. The smell hit me instantly. Sawdust, motor oil, old tobacco. It smelled like Dad. I flipped on the single bulb hanging from the ceiling. The room was cluttered. Meredith's cleaning crew hadn't bothered with this place. It was full of half-finished projects, rusted tools, and jars of screws. I walked to the workbench. It was scarred and stained. I ran my hand over the wood. I need to put it where she cannot find the key. Frank's words echoed in my head. She wouldn't look here. She wouldn't think anything of value could be in a room that smelled like this. I started searching. I looked in the tool chests. I looked in the paint cans. I looked inside the old shop vac. Nothing. I sat on the stool, frustrated. Think. Allison. Where would he hide it? I looked at the workbench again. It was an old, heavy butcher block table he had bought at an auction. It had a single drawer in the center. I opened the drawer. It was full of pencils and tape measures. I pulled the drawer all the way out, dumping the contents on the floor. I looked into the empty cavity. Nothing. I was about to put the drawer back when I saw it. Not inside the drawer, under it. I lay on my back on the cold concrete floor and looked up at the underside of the workbench top. There, taped to the wood with silver duct tape, was a small brass key. It wasn't a house key. It wasn't a car key. It was a small, flat key with a number stamped on it. 402. It looked like a key to a locker or a storage unit. I peeled the tape away. The key fell into my hand. It was cold and heavy. I sat up, clutching it in my fist. Meredith had the house. She had the bank accounts. She had the lawyers and the fake charities and the private investigators. But she didn't have this. She had stripped the office, but she had forgotten the man. I kissed the key. It tasted like metal and dust. I stood up and turned off the light. I walked back through the woods, the key burning a hole in my pocket. I had the map. Now I just had to find the treasure. The key was a tangible weight in my pocket, a small piece of brass that felt hotter than the rest of the world. But a key is useless without a lock. I had the what, but I did not have the where. I spent the rest of the night in my apartment, fueled by black coffee and a manic sort of energy. I scoured the photos I had taken of my father's workshop before I fled. I zoomed in on the pegboards, the trash cans, the dusty shelves. Nothing. Then I remembered the key itself. It had a number stamped on it, 402. But on the head of the key, in faint, worn letters, was a brand name, CitySafe. I looked it up. CitySafe wasn't a lock manufacturer. It was a local chain of self-storage facilities. There were 3 locations in the greater metro area. I waited until 8 in the morning, watching the sun drag itself up over the skyline. Then I called the first location. "I am calling about Unit 402, I said, trying to sound official. "I am the executor of the estate for the account holder. I need to verify access hours." The clerk sounded bored. "Name on the account, Robert Richardson." I said, "No account under that name." She said, my heart sank. Of course, he wouldn't have used his own name. Frank had said he was scared. He had said he needed to hide things. I tried the second location. Same result. I drove to the third location. It was in a gritty industrial district, sandwiched between a tire reclamation plant and a salvage yard. The sign out front was faded, the razor wire atop the fence glinting in the morning light. I walked into the office. The manager was a guy with grease under his fingernails and a suspicion of everyone who walked through the door. "I have a key for Unit 402, I said, placing it on the counter. "My father passed away. I believe he rented a unit here." "Name," the manager grunted. "He might have used an alias." I said, But I have the key, and I have his death certificate. The manager eyed me. He picked up the key. He looked at the code stamped on the back. We don't usually let people in without a name match, he said. Please. I said, I slid a $50 bill across the counter. It was grocery money for 2 weeks. But I didn't care. I just need to check if the key works. If it does not, I will leave. He looked at the money. He looked at the key. Unit is around the back, he said. Pocketing the cash. Row D. If anyone asks, I didn't see you. I drove my car around to row D. It was a long corridor of orange metal doors. I counted them down. 398, 400, 402. I stood in front of the door. The wind rattled the corrugated metal. I inserted the key into the padlock. It turned with a heavy, satisfying click. I pulled the hasp free and rolled the door up. The metal groaned, a sound of protest against the silence. The unit was small, 5 feet by 5 feet. It smelled of old paper and stale air. It was not empty. Stacked against the back wall were 6 plastic bins, and sitting on top of them was a black metal briefcase. I stepped inside and pulled the string for the light bulb. Taped to the top of the metal briefcase was a white envelope. On the front, in my father's blocky, distinctive handwriting, were the words, "If this is opened, I'm gone." I stared at the words. He had known. He had anticipated this exact moment. He had known that one day he would be dead, and I would be standing here, fighting a war I didn't understand. I didn't open the envelope there. I didn't trust the silence of the storage yard. I loaded the bins and the briefcase into the trunk of my car. Covering them with a blanket, I locked the unit and drove straight to Elias's office. We locked the door to his conference room. Elias told his receptionist to hold all calls. We started with the briefcase. Inside, there was no cash. There were no diamonds. There was only paper. But it was paper that screamed. There were journals, 3 of them, leather-bound. My father had never been a diarist, or so I thought, but these were detailed logs of the last 2 years of his life. I opened the first one. The handwriting was strong at the beginning, then grew shakier as the dates progressed. October 14th. One entry read, Meredith asked for another loan for the lifestyle brand. I told her no. She became aggressive. She mentioned the medical power of attorney. She said I was getting confused. I am not confused. I am just tired. I read on, my chest tightening. November 2nd. I found papers on my desk today. Transfer documents for the brokerage account. I did not request them. Meredith says she is simplifying things for me. She says I signed them last week. I do not remember signing them. I feel a pressure building, a wall closing in. Elias was going through the plastic bins. Allison. Look at this, he said. He held up a stack of bank statements, original statements, not the redacted garbage Meredith's lawyers had sent us. These are the statements for the consulting LLC, Elias said. And look, notes in the margins. I looked. Next to the payments to Omega Consulting. My father had written, toll booth, and next to another payment, silence money. He knew. I whispered. He knew he was being extorted. I went back to the journal. The final entry was dated 3 weeks before he died. I have done it. I have written the yellow codicil. I met with a notary in the next county. I have separated the inheritance from the influence. If Meredith finds out, she will burn the world down. I have hidden the copy in the metal case. The original is with the notary. I looked at the metal case. I dug through the papers. There was no will. There was no codicil. Someone got here first. I said, panic rising. No, Elias said. He said the copy is in the case. He flipped the briefcase upside down. He ran his hands along the lining. Here, he said. He pulled out a pocket knife and sliced open the velvet lining of the lid. A yellow envelope slid out. My hands were shaking as I opened it. It was a document titled Second Codicil to the Last Will and Testament of Robert Richardson. It was handwritten, on yellow legal paper. It revoked all prior appointments of executors. It removed Meredith as a beneficiary entirely, citing gross financial misconduct and elder abuse. It named me as the sole executor and beneficiary. and it established a trust to be used for the investigation and prosecution of fraud committed against my estate. I read it twice. Tears blurred my vision. He hadn't abandoned me. He hadn't been fooled. He had been fighting back, quietly, desperately, until the end. This changes everything, Elias said softly. This is the nuclear option. But we have to prove it, I said. We have to prove this is real, and that the other will, the one Meredith is pushing, is the result of fraud. We need to file this, Elias said, immediately, but we also need to back it up. We need to know who the notary was. The name is here. Samuel Higgins. We searched for Samuel Higgins. He was dead. He had died of a heart attack 2 days after my father passed. The timing was too clean, too perfect. The original is gone, I said, feeling the cold settle back in. If the notary is dead, Meredith has probably destroyed his records. We only have this copy. A copy is admissible if we can prove the original was lost or destroyed, not by the testator. Elias said, but it is harder, much harder. Meredith will say it is a forgery. She will say you wrote it yourself on yellow paper because you knew his habits. She will say exactly that. I realized. We need more, Elias said. We need the foundation records. We need to prove the motive for the forgery. If we can prove she was stealing from him, the judge will believe she had a reason to suppress this codicil. We filed a motion to compel the full records of the Richardson Family Foundation. We attached the journal entries, redacted to protect the location of the other assets, as proof that my father suspected fraud. Meredith's team did not take it lying down. They hit back hard. 3 days later, we were back in court. The courtroom was packed. Meredith had brought her entourage again. But this time, they had a witness. Her lawyer called a woman named Sarah Jenkins to the stand. I recognized her immediately. She had worked as a junior marketing assistant at Meredith's company about 5 years ago. I had met her once at a Christmas party. She had been drunk and loud. Now, she looked demure. She wore a modest blue dress and kept her hands folded in her lap. Ms. Jenkins, the silver-haired lawyer asked, did you ever witness interactions between the decedent, Robert Richardson, and his daughter? Allison, yes, she said softly. Can you describe an incident that occurred in June of 2023? I frowned. June 2023. Yes, Sarah said. Allison came to the office. She was agitated. She was shouting at her father in the lobby. She was demanding money. She said she was in trouble. She said she owed people money for substances. I gasped. A murmur went through the courtroom. Order. The judge said. She said if he didn't give her $20,000, she would hurt herself. Sarah continued, wiping a tear. It was heartbreaking. Mr. Richardson was crying. He wrote her a check just to make her stop screaming. I stared at her. It was a complete fabrication. I had never asked my father for money for drugs. I had never even been to Meredith's office in June of that year. Elias leaned over. Is any of this true? No, I hissed. It is a lie. A total lie. Elias stood up for cross-examination. Ms. Jenkins, he said, you say this happened in June of 2023. Do you remember the exact date? I believe it was the 14th, she said. It was Flag Day. I remember the decorations. The 14th of June. Elias repeated. And you saw this personally? Yes. Elias walked back to our table. He looked at me. Where were you on June 14th? 2023, he whispered. I racked my brain. June, summer, 2 years ago, I was in Chicago. I said suddenly. I was at the logistics conference, the annual supply chain summit. Can you prove it? Elias asked. I pulled out my phone. I scrolled frantically through my old emails. Here, I said, I found the flight confirmation and the hotel receipt. I checked in on the 13th and checked out on the 15th. Elias smiled. It was a wolfish smile. Your Honor, Elias said, turning to the judge, we have just accessed digital records indicating that on June 14th, 2023, Ms. Richardson was in Chicago, Illinois, attending a professional conference. We have flight records and hotel receipts. She could not possibly have been in the lobby of her sister's company screaming for drug money. The courtroom went silent. Sarah Jenkins looked at Meredith. It was a quick, panicked glance, but everyone saw it. Meredith's face was a mask of stone. I might have the date wrong," Sarah stammered. "It might have been July." "You were very specific about the Flag Day decorations." "Ms. Jenkins," Elias said coldly, "are you lying to this court?" "Objection," Meredith's lawyer shouted, badgering the witness. "Sustained," the judge said. But she looked at Sarah Jenkins with a new expression, distaste. The witness stepped down. Her testimony was shredded, but the damage was the feeling in the room. Meredith was willing to manufacture reality, and if she could find one person to lie, she could find 10. We walked out of the courtroom feeling like we had dodged a bullet, but the gun was still pointed at us. "We need to break the foundation," Elias said. "We need someone on the inside." I thought about the journal, toll booth, silence money. There was a name in the journal I hadn't recognized at first. Greaves. Greaves called again. He is worried about the tax audit. I searched for accountants named Greaves in the area. I found a Martin Greaves. He had a small practice in the suburbs. I drove there. His office was in a strip mall, next to a vape shop. Mr. Greaves was a nervous man. He had thin hair and ink stains on his shirt pocket. When I told him who I was, he tried to close the door in my face. "I am not talking to you," he said. I signed a non-disclosure. "Mr. Greaves," I said, jamming my foot in the door. "My father is dead. He wrote about you in his journal. He said you were worried." Greaves froze. "He wrote about me. He called it a toll booth." I said, "He said he was being pressured." Greaves looked around the parking lot. He looked terrified. "Meet me at the diner down the road," he whispered. "In 20 minutes. Do not let anyone follow you." I met him at the diner. It was raining again. The windows steamed up. Greaves sat in a back booth, shredding a paper napkin. I showed him the photo of the note from the journal. "If this is opened, I'm gone. I'm going to prison." "Aren't I?" Greaves said, his voice trembling. "Not if you help me," I said. "Tell me about the foundation." "It was never a charity," Greaves said. "It was a pass-through. Meredith set it up. She used it to funnel money out of the estate and into political donations." "Political donations?" I asked. "Campaign finance." Greaves said, "Dark money. She was buying influence. She was buying judges. She was buying zoning permits for her developments. The grants to those fake charities? They were just waypoints. The money eventually ended up in super PACs and offshore accounts. Who was she paying?" I asked. Greaves shook his head. "Everyone, local councilmen, state senators, maybe higher. That is why you cannot win. Ms. Richardson, you are not fighting a family. You are fighting a political machine. The consulting fees your father paid? That was protection money. So they wouldn't audit the business he built." I sat back, stunned. It wasn't just greed. It was corruption on a massive scale. My father hadn't just been a victim of a greedy daughter. He had been a hostage to a system she helped build. "Will you testify?" I asked. Greaves laughed, a hollow sound. "And end up like your father?" "No. I am moving to Costa Rica next week. I suggest you stop digging before you end up in an accident." He threw a $20 bill on the table and walked out. I went back to Elias. I told him everything. "Dark money," Elias said, rubbing his temples. "That explains the special master. That explains the judge's hesitation. They are all drinking from the same trough." The next day, Meredith's lawyers requested an emergency settlement conference. We met in their high-rise office. The view was spectacular, looking down on the city like gods. Meredith wasn't there, just the silver-haired shark and 2 other suits. "Ms. Richardson," the lawyer said, "we are prepared to make a final offer. We want to end this unpleasantness." He slid a paper across the mahogany table. I looked at the number. $2 million. It was more money than I could imagine. It was freedom. It was a house, a new life, safety, but then I read the conditions. Clause 4. Confidentiality. I would be permanently barred from discussing the estate. the foundation, or the family business with anyone, ever. Clause 5. Guardianship oversight. I read it twice. In the interest of the beneficiary's long-term stability, the settlement funds shall be placed in a controlled trust. The beneficiary agrees to submit to a voluntary financial guardianship for a period of 5 years, to be overseen by a trustee appointed by the executor. I looked up. You want to put me under guardianship. I said, you want to declare me incompetent. It is for your own protection. The lawyer said smoothly, given the history of instability, it ensures the money lasts. It ensures I can never testify. I said, my voice rising, if I am under guardianship, I am legally a ward. I cannot sue. I cannot speak. I cannot do anything without your permission. It is a standard protective measure. The lawyer said, it is a muzzle, I said. I looked at the check. $2 million. I was broke. I was tired. I was scared. But if I signed this, the truth about my father would die. The yellow codicil would be burned. Meredith would win, and I would be a rich prisoner. I pushed the paper back. No. I said. The lawyer's eyes narrowed. Ms. Richardson, this is a very generous offer. You will not get another one if you walk out of here. We will destroy you in court. We will bring up every mistake you have ever made. We will ruin you. You already tried. I said, standing up, and you missed. I walked out. My legs were shaking, but my head was clear. When I got back to Elias's office, there was a courier waiting. He handed me a large envelope, more motions. I groaned. I opened it. It wasn't a motion. It was a subpoena. But the seal at the top wasn't the county probate court. It was the state attorney general's office of the neighboring state, the state where the Mail Drop LLC was registered. Subpoena duces tecum. In the matter of the investigation into Omega Consulting LLC, I looked at Elias. His eyes went wide. Someone else is looking. He said, Greaves said they were worried about an audit. Maybe the audit started. This isn't Meredith suing me. I said, this is the government investigating the fake company. If they are investigating the LLC, Elias said, the pace of his voice picking up, then the probate court is about to become a crime scene. But we had a problem closer to home. That evening, I was doing what I had become best at, internet sleuthing. I was looking into Harold Pallow, the special master who had dismissed our discovery requests. I searched his name combined with Julian Thorne, Meredith's financial advisor. I found nothing on Google. Then I tried the Wayback Machine. I looked at archived newsletters from a private hunting lodge in upstate New York, and there it was, a PDF from 3 years ago, annual pheasant shoot, winter circle. There was a photo of 4 men standing in front of a rustic lodge, holding shotguns and smiling. On the left, Julian Thorne. On the right, Harold Pallow. And standing between them, the judge's husband. I stared at the screen. The pixelated faces smiled back at me. It wasn't just a connection. It was a web. The financial advisor managed the money. The special master protected the discovery process. The judge's husband was social friends with both. Meredith hadn't just hired good lawyers. She had rented the entire judicial system of the county. I printed the photo. Elias, I said. Calling him late at night, I found the link. Pallow and Thorne go hunting together, with the judge's husband. There was a long silence on the line. That is why Pallow dismissed the discovery. Elias said quietly, he isn't neutral. He is part of the protection racket. We have to file a motion to recuse. I said, we will. Elias said, but Allison, if we accuse the special master and implicate the judge's husband, we are declaring war on the court itself. They won't just try to beat us. They will try to bury us. Let them try. I said, I have the key. I have the journal. And now I know who the enemy is. I hung up. I looked at the yellow envelope containing the copy of the codicil. My father had written, separate inheritance from influence. He had failed. The influence had swallowed the inheritance whole. But he hadn't known about the subpoena from the next state over. And he hadn't known that his daughter, the one he worried was too fragile, was about to light a match and drop it right into the center of their web. I went to the window and looked out at the city. Somewhere out there, the man in the black suit was preparing his briefcase. I didn't know who he was yet, but for the first time, I felt like the cavalry was coming. We filed the motion to recuse the special master at 9 in the morning. By 10, the courthouse felt different. Usually, the halls of the probate division were sleepy places, echoing with the quiet shuffle of papers and the murmurs of bored clerks. But that morning, the air was electric. We had not just filed a motion. We had thrown a grenade into the lap of the establishment. Elias walked beside me, his briefcase heavy with the evidence we had unearthed, the photograph from the hunting lodge, the dates of the trips, the undeniable social link between the man supposed to be a neutral referee, the financial advisor accused of laundering money, and the husband of the judge presiding over our case. We are kicking the hornet's nest. Allison, Elias muttered, checking his watch. Be ready to get stung. The hearing was scheduled for the afternoon. It was an emergency session, squeezed in between a guardianship review and a bankruptcy filing. When we entered the courtroom, Meredith was already there. She did not look at me. She was staring straight ahead, her posture rigid, her neck muscles tight cords beneath her skin. Her team of lawyers looked less like sharks today and more like a wall, a defensive phalanx designed to absorb impact. Judge Calloway took the bench. She looked tired. Her face was pale, and she refused to make eye contact with anyone in the room. Mr. Thorne, she said, addressing Elias, you have filed a motion to disqualify Special Master Palo. This is a serious step. It is a necessary step. Your Honor, Elias said, his voice steady. We have evidence of an undisclosed personal relationship between the Special Master, the defendant's financial advisor, and... He paused. He did not say your husband. He let the silence do the work, and other parties close to this court. Elias finished. This relationship creates a reasonable apprehension of bias. Mr. Palo has summarily dismissed valid discovery requests that would have exposed financial irregularities involving Mr. Julian Thorne. The connection explains the protection. Meredith's lead attorney stood up. He didn't smooth his tie this time. He looked agitated. Your Honor, this is outrageous, he said. This is a desperate attempt by a spiraling litigant to delay the inevitable. Ms. Richardson is attacking the integrity of this court because she cannot accept the facts of the will. She sees conspiracies everywhere. First it was the break-in, then the fake arrest record, and now she is slandering a respected officer of the court. This is pathological. He turned to look at me, his eyes full of mock concern. We are witnessing a breakdown. Your Honor, Ms. Richardson is flailing. She is attacking the system itself. I sat there, gripping the edge of the table, spiraling. That was their word. They wanted to paint me as the crazy sister, the one who saw ghosts. Elias did not flinch. He walked to the bench and placed the photograph of the pheasant shoot on the judge's desk. This is not a conspiracy theory, Your Honor, Elias said. This is a photograph from the winner's circle at the High Pines Lodge, dated 3 years ago. It shows Mr. Palo, Mr. Julian Thorne, and Mr. Gerald Calloway, your husband, arm in arm. Mr. Palo had a duty to disclose this friendship. He did not. The judge looked at the photo. She stared at it for a long time. The silence in the room was suffocating. I could hear the hum of the air conditioning, the ticking of the clock, the beating of my own heart. She knew. She had to know. She probably had that same photo on her mantel at home. Judge Calloway looked up. Her expression was unreadable. A mask of judicial neutrality stretched thin over something that looked like fear. The court takes allegations of bias seriously, she said. Her voice was tight. However, in a small legal community, social overlaps are inevitable. A hunting trip 3 years ago does not automatically equal prejudice in a current matter. She pushed the photo away. I will take the motion under advisement, she said, but I am warning both sides. We are here to probate a will. We are not here to litigate the social lives of court appointees. Stay focused on the will. If I see another motion that strays into personal attacks, there will be sanctions." She banged the gavel. It sounded less like a judgment and more like a plea for silence. We walked out of the courtroom, and I felt the weight of the system crushing down on me. She hadn't denied it. She hadn't recused him. She had just told us to shut up. She is protecting him. I whispered to Elias. She is protecting her husband. She is protecting herself. Elias said grimly, "If she admits the conflict, every ruling Palo maid has to be thrown out. The case starts over. She can't afford that, but she is rattled. Look at Meredith." I looked. Meredith was arguing with her lawyers in the corner of the hallway. Her face was flushed. She looked furious. "They are scared," Elias said. "We didn't get the recusal, but we drew blood. Now, keep your head down. They are going to squeeze you." He was right. The squeeze came 2 days later. I was at home, organizing the documents from the storage unit, when there was a knock at the door. It was my landlord, Mr. Russo. He was a nice man, usually. He always asked about my car and complained about the weather. Today, he wouldn't meet my eyes. "Allison," he said, standing in the hallway, "we need to talk about your lease." "My lease?" I asked. "It is not up for another 4 months." "I know," he said, shifting his weight. "But I have been getting complaints." "Complaints," I repeated. "About what?" "I am barely here. I don't play music. I don't have parties. Neighbors are saying there is a lot of traffic," he said vaguely. "People coming and going at odd hours. Strangers hanging around the building. It is making people nervous." "Mr. Russo?" I said. "The only strangers hanging around are the private investigators my sister hired to stalk me." "Look, I don't want any trouble," he said, holding up a hand. "But the building insurance, the rates are going up. I am renovating the unit. I can't renew your lease when it ends in June. I am giving you notice now so you have time to find a place." I stared at him. He was lying. He was a terrible liar. "Who called you?" I asked. "Was it a lawyer? Did they offer to buy the building? Or did they just threaten to call the city inspector on your illegal basement unit?" Mr. Russo's face went red. "You are a good kid, Allison," he said quietly. "But you are swimming with sharks. Just find a new place." "Okay." He turned and walked away. I closed the door and leaned against it. Soft power. That was what Elias called it. They couldn't shoot me. So they would make me homeless. They would make me unhireable. They would make me radioactive until I had nowhere left to go but down. I went back to the table. I looked at the boxes from the storage unit. My father's life was spread out in front of me. Receipts, journals, letters. I picked up a large manila envelope I hadn't opened yet. It was at the bottom of the second bin, on the front, in thick black marker. My father had written, "The person who thinks they won." I felt a chill go through me. It wasn't addressed to me. It wasn't addressed to Meredith. It was addressed to the victor, to the one who survived the war he knew was coming. I opened it. There was no, "My dearest Allison," or "I love you." It was cold. It was methodical. It was a dossier of betrayal. It contained a list of names, dates, and account numbers. It detailed the formation of the Richardson Family Foundation. It detailed the transfer of assets to the Omega Consulting LLC. But the most chilling part was a single sheet of paper with a handwritten flowchart. At the top was Meredith. Below her was Julian Thorne. Below him were the fake charities. And off to the side, connected by a dotted line to the family trust, was a box labeled simply, "The Liaison," underneath the flowchart. My father had written 3 sentences. They are using the trust to hide the debt. The foundation washes the money, but the trust holds the leverage. Do not trust the trustee. He is not working for the estate. I stared at the words. Do not trust the trustee. Marcus Sterling, the man who refused to speak to me, the man who routed everything through Meredith. I grabbed my phone and took a picture of the page. I sent it to Elias. "We need to subpoena Sterling's internal comms." I typed, "Now." Elias didn't ask questions. He filed the subpoena the next morning. We demanded all internal communications regarding the Richardson Trust. Emails, memos, text messages, and call logs. Meredith's counsel fought it with a ferocity that bordered on panic. They filed an emergency motion to quash. They claimed trustee privilege. They claimed commercial sensitivity. They claimed the request was harassing and overly broad. But this time, the judge was cornered. After the recusal motion, she couldn't look like she was protecting them again. Not on a standard discovery request. She granted the subpoena. 10 days later, we were sitting in a deposition room. Marcus Sterling hadn't come himself. He had sent a compliance officer, a woman named Ms. Halloway with glasses so thick they magnified her eyes into nervous orbs. Elias slid a document across the table. It was an email chain we had received in the document dump. Ms. Halloway. Elias said, "This is an email from Marcus Sterling to an external email address. Vanguard 77. The subject line is distribution approval. Yes, Ms. Halloway said. In this email, Mr. Sterling asks Vanguard 77 for permission to release funds for the property tax on the Richardson estate. Why would a trustee need permission from an anonymous email address to pay a standard bill?" Ms. Halloway shifted in her seat. "The trustee often seeks counsel. From whom?" Elias pressed. "Who is Vanguard 77? "I do not know," she said. Elias pulled out another email. "Here is the reply from Vanguard 77. It says, 'Hold payment, squeeze the asset.'" Elias looked up. "Squeeze the asset. That is not legal counsel. That is a directive to damage the estate. Who is giving orders to the trustee?" Miss Halloway looked at Meredith's lawyer. The lawyer gave a microscopic shake of his head. "The trustee receives guidance from a liaison," Miss Halloway said, her voice faint. "A liaison." Elias repeated. "Is this liaison named in the trust instrument?" "No." "Is this liaison a beneficiary?" "No." "Then who are they?" Ms. Halloway swallowed. "I cannot say. The liaison is authorized by a separate instrument, a private agreement that overrides the fiduciary duty of the trustee." Elias roared. He slammed his hand on the table. "We are talking about fraud. Ms. Halloway. Who is the liaison?" "Objection," Meredith's lawyer shouted. "Asked and answered. The witness has stated she relies on a separate instrument. This is outside the scope of the deposition. We are done here," the lawyer said, grabbing Ms. Halloway's arm. They stormed out of the room. I looked at Elias. "The liaison." I said, "That is the ghost. That is the person pulling the strings." "It is Julian Thorne," Elias said. "Or someone above him. They are running the trust like a shadow corporation." We went back to the office. The puzzle pieces were fitting together. But the picture they formed was terrifying. We needed the will, the real will, the yellow codicil. We knew the original was gone, likely destroyed by Meredith or her agents after the notary died. But we had the copy from the briefcase. The problem was proving it had ever been filed. My father's journal said, "I have done it." The original is with the notary. But there was another entry, one I had missed earlier. A small scribble in the margin of a grocery list. "Submitted e-file. Just in case. E-file." I said, "Electronic filing." We logged into the court's public access system. There was nothing, no record of a second will or a codicil, but Elias knew something about the system. "When you file a document," he said, typing furiously, "the system generates a temporary receipt number, even if the document is rejected or withdrawn. That number exists in the database sequence." He pulled up the docket for my father's case. "Look at the filing dates," he said. "Petition filed. February 2nd. Sequence number, 10,452. Motion to freeze. February 4th. Sequence number, 10,454. "Where is 10,453, I asked. "Exactly," Elias said. The sequence skipped a number. He tapped into the clerk's administrative log, a level of access he had as a registered attorney. He found it. Sequence 10,453. Document type, testamentary supplement. Status, withdrawn by filer. Date, February 3rd. It was there, I whispered. It was filed, and then withdrawn. Who withdrew it? I asked. The log says, Robert Richardson. My father died on February 2nd. I said, he couldn't have withdrawn it on February 3rd. Someone used his credentials. Elias said, someone logged in as him, the day after he died, and deleted the filing before the clerk could docket it. That is a felony. I said, that is computer fraud. That is evidence tampering. We printed the log. We printed the receipt sequence. We went to the court clerk the next morning. The head clerk was a formidable woman named Mrs. Higgins, no relation to the notary. She looked at the printout. She looked at her screen. This is impossible. She said, a withdrawn filing should still show as a withdrawn entry on the docket. It shouldn't disappear, unless someone expunged it. Elias said, unless someone with admin access removed the line item entirely. Mrs. Higgins turned pale. I didn't do this. I believe you, Elias said. But someone did. And we can prove the document existed because the sequence number is missing. We filed a motion for an emergency evidentiary hearing. We attached the log. We attached the journal entry. We attached the copy of the yellow codicil. The judge had no choice. She set the hearing for the final week before the estate distribution deadline. She called us into her chambers. Meredith's team was there. They looked exhausted. The polished veneer was cracking. I am setting a strict schedule. Judge Calloway said, we are going to settle this. Next Friday, you will present your evidence regarding the validity of this yellow codicil, and you, counsel. She pointed at Meredith's lawyer. You will explain why there is a gap in the court's electronic records. If I find that someone has tampered with the court's filing system, she said, her voice low and dangerous, I will refer this matter to the district attorney. I do not care who they are. Do you understand me? Yes, Your Honor. We all said. As we walked out, the hallway was empty. Meredith stopped. She leaned against the wall, closing her eyes. She looked older. The lines around her mouth were deep grooves. Meredith, I said. She opened her eyes. They were wet. You are ruining everything, she hissed. You stupid, selfish child. You are burning down the house while we are still inside it. I am just trying to find the truth. I said, the truth. She laughed. It was a jagged, broken sound. You think the truth is some noble thing? You don't even know what Dad owed. Allison, you don't know who he took money from to build that company. Who? I asked. Who did he owe? People you don't say no to? She whispered. The foundation. The trust. It wasn't greed. Allison, it was a payment plan. It was the only thing keeping them from coming after us. She stepped closer, her perfume smelling like wilted flowers. If you expose this, if you freeze the accounts, the payments stop. And if the payments stop, they won't just sue us. They will come for us. Who is they? I asked. Is it the liaison? Meredith looked at me with genuine pity. Pray you never find out, she said. She pushed past me and walked away, her heels clicking a frantic rhythm on the marble floor. I stood there, stunned. Was she telling the truth? Was the fraud actually a desperate attempt to pay off a loan shark? Or a cartel? Or something worse? It didn't matter. I couldn't stop now. I had to know. The week before the hearing passed in a blur of preparation. We subpoenaed the IT logs of the court. We prepared the handwriting expert. We built a timeline of the forgery. On the eve of the hearing, I was at Elias's office. It was 10 at night. We were eating cold pizza and reviewing the exhibit list. There was a knock on the frosted glass door. Elias looked up. The office was closed. I will get it, I said. I opened the door. A bicycle courier was standing there, dripping wet from the rain. Package for Allison Richardson, he said. I signed for it. It was a plain brown envelope, no return address. I opened it at Elias's desk. Inside was a stack of paper. I recognized the formatting immediately. It was the sealed attachment to the will. The one Henderson, the estate attorney, had been so terrified of, the one Meredith had fought to keep sealed, the one the judge had looked at in chambers and then buried. Who sent this? Elias asked. I don't know. I said. I started reading. It was a confession. Not a financial one, but a personal one. To my daughters. It began. If you are reading this, I have failed to fix the past. It detailed the origin of the debt. It wasn't a bank. It wasn't a crime syndicate. It was a settlement. A massive, off-the-book settlement for a negligence claim from 30 years ago. A chemical spill at one of his early factories that he had covered up. I have been paying for silence for 3 decades. He wrote, the foundation was the vehicle. The trustee manages the flow. If the money stops, the evidence of the spill will be released. It will destroy everything I built. I turned the page, and then I stopped. The pages were numbered at the bottom, page 1 of 5, page 2 of 5, page 3 of 5, and then page 5 of 5. Page 4 was missing. I looked closer. At the bottom of page 3, in the margin, there was a handwritten note in blue ink. It was my father's handwriting. Page 4 is the key. Find page 4. He had sent this to himself? No. He had arranged for this to be sent. But why leave out a page? Elias looked at the document. He isn't telling us the whole story. Elias said, he is giving us a weapon. But he withheld the ammunition. Why? I asked. Because page 4 names. Elias said, page 4 identifies the people receiving the hush money. He took it out to protect you, or to make you look for it. I looked at the handwritten note again. Find page 4. It wasn't a command. It was a clue. I looked at the way he wrote the number 4. He crossed it, like a European 7. I remembered the storage unit key, key 402. I remembered the date of the drug money incident, June 14th. 14. I remembered the time on the clock in the photo of the workshop he had sent me years ago. 4 o'clock. 4. Wait, I said. I grabbed the yellow codicil copy, the one from the briefcase. I turned to the 4th paragraph. I hereby bequeath the contents of the safe deposit box at First National Bank, box number 444, to Allison Richardson, box 444. We never checked banks. I said, we only checked storage units. It is too late, Elias said, looking at the clock. The banks are closed. The hearing is at 9 a.m. tomorrow. Then we go to court with what we have. I said, we have the confession of the cover-up. We have the missing file log. We have the recusal evidence, and we have a missing page, Elias said. I looked at the incomplete document. It was a risk. Meredith would say it was a forgery. She would say I fabricated it to smear our father. But then I saw something else. On the back of the envelope the courier had delivered, there was a stamp, not a postage stamp, an official seal. Superior Court of the State of New York. Sealed. This hadn't come from a storage unit. This had come from inside the court system. Someone inside the machine had leaked it to me. Someone wanted me to win, or someone wanted Meredith to lose. I looked at Elias. We are not just fighting Meredith. I said, we are fighting a civil war, and someone just gave us a cannon. I put the document in my bag. I felt a strange calm settle over me. The fear was gone. The confusion was gone. Tomorrow, the man in the black suit would walk in. I didn't know who he was yet, but I knew what he was bringing. He was bringing the end of the world, and I was ready to watch it burn. The courtroom was not just a room that morning. It was a theater, and every seat was taken. The air was heavy, smelling of damp wool and nervous sweat, recycled through vents that hadn't been cleaned in a decade. I sat at the defendant's table. My hands clasped so tightly in my lap that my fingers were white. I felt a tremor running through my legs, a physical vibration of fear that I could not suppress. Meredith arrived 5 minutes late. It was a power move, designed to make the judge wait, to show the room who controlled the clock. She did not wear black today. She wore a suit of cream-colored silk, bright and impeccable, tailored to make her look innocent, wealthy, and victorious. She walked down the center aisle like it was a runway, flanked by her silver-haired attorney and a new addition, a man carrying a briefcase who looked more like a bodyguard than a paralegal. She didn't look at me. She didn't look at the press gallery where the blogger was furiously typing on his phone. She looked straight at the empty judge's bench, her chin high, her expression serene. She looked like she had already won. She looked like the money was already in her offshore accounts. Elias leaned over to me. His tie was crooked. He smelled of coffee and peppermint. "Do not look at her," he whispered. "Look at the evidence. The truth is in the paper." I nodded. But I couldn't help it. I looked at her, and for a second, I saw the crack. It was in her hand, the left one, resting on the table. It was tapping a frantic, erratic rhythm against the wood. Tap, 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 tap. She was terrified. She was just better at hiding it than I was. "All rise," the bailiff bellowed. Judge Calloway swept in. Her robes billowed around her. She looked tired. There were dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't hide. She looked like a woman who knew she was sitting on a bomb and was just praying it wouldn't go off on her watch. "Be seated," she said, her voice tight. "We are here for the final evidentiary hearing in the matter of the estate of Robert Richardson. I have reviewed the motions. I have reviewed the filings. We are going to keep this focused." She looked at Elias. "Mr. Thorne, you filed a motion claiming the existence of a withdrawn testamentary document. You have the floor." Elias stood up. He didn't use big words. He didn't use theatrical gestures. He simply walked to the podium and placed a single sheet of paper on the overhead projector. "Your Honor," he began, "the court's own digital records tell the story. On February 3rd, one day after the decedent passed, a user logged into the electronic filing system using Robert Richardson's credentials. This user uploaded a document. The system generated a sequence number, 10453. He pointed to the screen where the log was displayed. Then, 6 minutes later, the same user withdrew the document, but they didn't just withdraw it. They attempted to expunge the record of the upload. They failed. The ghost of that document remains in the sequence gap. He swapped the paper for the copy of the yellow codicil we had found in the briefcase. "We believe that document was this," Elias said, "a second codicil, removing Meredith Richardson as executor and beneficiary for cause. We found this copy in a locked storage unit, hidden inside a briefcase that the decedent instructed his daughter to find. It is handwritten. It is on the decedent's preferred stationery, and it matches the intent described in his personal journals." Meredith's lawyer was on his feet before Elias could finish. "Objection," he roared. "This is pure fantasy. Counsel is presenting a photocopy of a handwritten note found in a storage locker as a legal will. There is no chain of custody. There is no original, for all we know. Ms. Richardson wrote this herself yesterday. It is a fabrication. Your Honor, and we demand sanctions for introducing fraudulent evidence." Elias turned to him. "If it is a fabrication, why did someone delete sequence number 10453 from the court server?" he asked quietly. Meredith's lawyer faltered. "A procedural error," he scoffed. "A glitch. Glitches don't use passwords." Elias said. The judge held up a hand. "Enough," she said. "Mr. Thorne, the absence of an electronic record is compelling, but it is not proof of content. Do you have the original?" "No, Your Honor," Elias said, "because the notary who witnessed it died 2 days after the decedent, and his records have curiously vanished." The judge frowned. She looked at Meredith. Meredith stopped tapping her finger. She stared back at the judge with a cold, hard challenge in her eyes. "Dare you?" she seemed to say. "Dare you accuse me? Call your witness." The judge said to Elias, "We call Marcus Sterling." Elias said. A murmur went through the room. The trustee, the ghost. The doors at the back opened, and Marcus Sterling walked in. He was a small man, impeccably dressed in a gray suit that looked like it was made of shark skin. He had thin lips and eyes that looked like calculators. He walked to the stand with an air of immense boredom. He was sworn in. He sat down and adjusted his cuffs. "Mr. Sterling," Elias said, "you are the trustee of the Richardson Family Trust. I am," Sterling said. His voice was dry, like rustling paper, and as trustee, you have a fiduciary duty to the beneficiaries, to Allison and Meredith Richardson. My duty is to the trust, Sterling corrected, to the instrument itself. Elias picked up the email chain, the one where Sterling asked Vanguard 77 for permission to pay a bill. Mr. Sterling. Who is Vanguard 77? Sterling didn't blink. That is an internal reference code for a compliance officer. Elias held up the second email, the one that said, squeeze the asset. Does a compliance officer usually give instructions to squeeze the assets of the estate they are supposed to protect? Elias asked. Sterling looked at the judge. Your Honor, these questions pertain to proprietary internal protocols. They are not relevant to the will. Answer the question, Judge Calloway said sharply. She was leaning forward. Sterling sighed. He looked at Meredith. Meredith gave a barely perceptible nod. I receive guidance, Sterling said, choosing his words with agonizing care. From a liaison. This liaison is appointed to oversee high-risk assets. Who appointed them? Elias asked. The decedent, Sterling said. In a separate instrument. A separate instrument. Elias repeated. A secret contract. Not secret, Sterling said. Private. Elias walked to the table and picked up the subpoena. Mr. Sterling, we have subpoenaed all governing documents of the trust. You did not produce this separate instrument. It is not a trust document, Sterling said smoothly. It is a side letter. It governs the relationship between the family foundation and the consulting entities. It falls outside the scope of your subpoena. Elias looked at the judge. Your Honor, the witness is admitting to the existence of a governing document that controls the entire estate, which he has withheld from this court. He claims he takes orders from a liaison based on this document. We move that he be compelled to produce it. Immediately. The judge looked at Sterling. Mr. Sterling, does this document exist? Yes, Your Honor. Do you have it? I have a digital copy on my secure server. Produce it, the judge ordered. Now. Meredith's lawyer jumped up. Your Honor, we request a recess. This is highly irregular. We need time to review the... Denied. Judge Calloway snapped. She looked angry now. She realized she had been played. She realized there were games happening in her courtroom that she hadn't authorized. Mr. Sterling, you will log in and retrieve that document. The bailiff will escort you to the clerk's terminal. Sterling hesitated. He looked at Meredith. Meredith's face had lost its color. She looked sick. Your Honor, Sterling said, his voice losing its dryness. That document. It contains sensitive third-party information. It involves entities that are... He stopped. That are what? The judge asked. That are not subject to this court's jurisdiction. Sterling whispered. The silence that followed was absolute. And then it was broken. The heavy double doors at the back of the courtroom swung open. They didn't just open. They were pushed with a weight and authority that commanded attention. Heads turned. The blogger stood up to get a better view. A man walked in. He was wearing a black suit. Not a lawyer's suit. Not a designer suit. It was a functional, nondescript black suit. He wore a white shirt and a plain black tie. He was tall, with short, military-cut gray hair, and a face that looked like it had been carved out of granite. He carried a sealed briefcase in one hand and a thick manila packet in the other. He didn't look at the gallery. He didn't look at me. He walked straight down the center aisle, his footsteps heavy and rhythmic on the carpet. Meredith turned to look at him. Her eyes went wide. Genuine, unadulterated terror washed over her face. She shrank back in her chair. The bailiff stepped forward, his hand moving to his belt. Sir, you cannot enter the well of the court. The man didn't stop. He stopped only when he reached the railing. He spoke quietly to the bailiff. He showed him the packet. I saw the bailiff's face go pale. He stepped back as if he had been burned. He looked at the judge. Your Honor. The bailiff stammered. He says he has a writ. Judge Calloway stared at the man. Who are you? The man placed the briefcase on the plaintiff's table. Right in front of Meredith. She recoiled from it. I am an authorized representative, the man said. His voice was a baritone, level and devoid of emotion. I am here on behalf of the Oversight Committee for the entity referenced in the separate instrument. He held up the packet. It was stamped with a seal I didn't recognize. It wasn't the state seal. It looked federal, Or maybe something older. The judge squinted at the seal. She froze. It wasn't a theatrical freeze. It was the stillness of a deer hearing a twig snap. She recognized the procedural landmine she had just stepped on. "Clear the courtroom," she said instantly. "What?" the blogger shouted. "I said clear the courtroom." The judge yelled. "Bailiff, remove the gallery. Remove the press. Lock the doors." "Objection," Meredith's lawyer shouted. "The public has a right. Sit down." "Counsel," the judge roared. The bailiff and 2 deputies began herding people out. There was shouting, confusion, the flash of cameras. I stayed in my seat. Elias put a hand on my shoulder to keep me grounded. When the room was empty, the heavy doors were locked with a resounding thud. It was just us now. Me, Elias, Meredith, her lawyers, the trustee, the judge, and the man in the black suit. "State your business," the judge said, her voice trembling slightly. The man didn't look at her. He looked at Marcus Sterling. "Mr. Sterling," the man said, "you were about to upload a document that is classified under the terms of the settlement agreement of 1994. That is a violation of the non-disclosure protocols." Sterling swallowed. He was shaking. I was ordered by the court." The man turned to the judge. "Your Honor, this probate matter touches upon assets that are currently the subject of a multi-jurisdictional investigation involving environmental liabilities and structured repayment vehicles. Specifically, the Richardson Family Foundation and Omega Consulting, LLC." Meredith let out a small, strangled sound. The man continued. "I have a federal writ here placing an immediate legal hold on all distribution of assets. There will be no probate. There will be no transfers. The estate is now evidence." He walked over to the judge and handed her the packet. She took it like it was radioactive. She read the first page. Her face went gray. He turned to Meredith. "Ms. Richardson," he said. He didn't raise his voice. He spoke to her like a disappointed teacher. "You were given specific instructions regarding the maintenance of the silence. You were told that the trust was a vessel, not a piggy bank. I didn't—" Meredith stammered. Her voice cracked. She sounded 5 years old. "I was just trying to manage the cash flow. Dad left it in a mess. Your father understood the arrangement." The man said cold, hard. He understood that the payments to the consulting firm were not optional. They were reparations. You tried to divert those funds. You tried to use the foundation to wash money for your own political interests. He opened the briefcase. He didn't take out a weapon. He took out a single file folder. "We have audited the Mail Drop LLC," he said. "We have traced the flow. The breach of contract is absolute." Meredith looked at Marcus Sterling. "Marcus, say something. Tell him we were protecting the asset." Sterling looked down at his shoes. He wouldn't meet her eyes. "I tried to warn you." "Meredith," Sterling whispered, "I told you Vanguard was watching." Meredith slumped in her chair. The fight went out of her. The posture, the silk suit, the arrogance, it all dissolved. She wasn't the mastermind. She was just a middle manager who had stolen from the wrong people. The man in the black suit turned to me. For the first time, he looked me in the eye. His eyes were colorless, flat. "Ms. Richardson," he said. I held my breath. "You have been looking for answers," he said. "You have the journal. You have the key. You have the partial confession." He knew. He knew everything. "You are the beneficiary of a tragedy," he said. "Your father committed a great error 30 years ago. He spent the rest of his life paying for it. He tried to shield you from the cost." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small lighter. The man in the black suit picked up the copy of the yellow codicil that Elias had left on the projector. He didn't burn it. He just looked at it. "This document identifies a problem," he said, "but the problem is no longer under the jurisdiction of this court." He looked at the judge. "Your Honor, the entity requests that you seal the record of this hearing. The estate is insolvent. The assets are forfeit under the terms of the 1994 agreement. There is nothing to inherit." The judge looked at the writ. She looked at Meredith, broken and weeping silently. She looked at me. She closed the file. "The court acknowledges the writ," she said, her voice hollow. The probate matter is stayed indefinitely pending the outcome of the federal investigation. All records are to be transferred to the custody of the special representative. She banged the gavel. It was a weak, dull thud. This court is adjourned. The man in the black suit took the files from the clerk's desk. He took the evidence Elias had brought. He took the packet from the judge. He walked back to Meredith. "We will be in touch regarding your personal liability," he said to her. Meredith put her head in her hands and sobbed. Then the man walked over to me. He stood there for a moment, looming over the table. He placed a card on the table. It had no name, just a number. "If you find page 4, he said softly, so only I could hear, "burn it." He turned and walked out. The doors closed behind him with a final, heavy click. The room was silent. Elias slumped in his chair. He looked like he had run a marathon. "We won," he whispered. I looked at Meredith, who was being consoled by her lawyers. Though they looked like they wanted to run away from her, she had lost the house. She had lost the money. She was about to be investigated by people who made the IRS look like a charity. I looked at the empty table where the evidence had been. "We didn't win, Elias," I said. "We just survived." I stood up. My legs were shaky, but I felt a strange lightness. The estate was gone. The money was gone. The house would be seized. I was walking out with nothing, just like I had walked in. But I had the truth. I knew who my father was. He wasn't a saint. He was a man who had made a mistake and paid for it every day of his life. And he had tried, in his own broken way, to keep me out of it. I looked at the card the man had left. "If you find page 4, I knew where page 4 was. It was in the one place I hadn't checked. The one place my father knew I would go when everything else was gone. I put the card in my pocket. I walked past Meredith. She didn't look up. "Goodbye, Meredith," I said. She didn't answer. I pushed open the doors and walked out into the hallway. The press was waiting, shouting questions. The blogger shoved his phone in my face. What happened in there? Who was that man? Did you get the money? I stopped. I looked at the camera. I smiled. It was the first real smile I had felt in months. "It's over," I said. I walked through the crowd, out of the courthouse, and into the bright, blinding sunlight. The city was noisy and chaotic and alive. I took a deep breath. The air smelled of exhaust and rain and freedom. I had a key in my pocket. I had a number on a card, and I had the rest of my life to decide what to do with them. The man in the black suit had walked in, and the judge had frozen. But for the first time in a long time, I was moving. Thank you for listening to this story. I hope the journey of Allison Richardson kept you on the edge of your seat as much as it did for me while writing it. I would love to know where in the world you are tuning in from. Please drop a comment below with your city or country. If you enjoyed this tale of family secrets and legal thrillers, please subscribe to Revenge Stories so you don't miss the next drama. Share your thoughts in English in the comments. Did Meredith deserve her fate? Who was the man in the black suit? I can't wait to read your theories.